All right, articles have described him as the most misunderstood man in America. He's smiling. We'll get to him in a moment. His work is cited by more economists than anyone else's in the world, according to data compiled by the University of Connecticut. Not to mention, he won a Nobel Prize in economics, and yes, there's his knack for making very, very accurate calls. 20 years ago, he warned about the risks of securitized mortgages. Then he cautioned against free capital flows from Wall Street to emerging markets. Both developments contributed to the global credit crisis. In the late 1990s, he opposed the repeal of Glass-Steagall, which let investment banks combine with commercial banks. Citigroup, as you know, exemplified that combination, and we all know how that one went. We are talking about Joseph Stiglitz. He's professor of economics at Columbia University. He joins us now in an exclusive Bloomberg interview to talk about what he expects next. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So we've touted how accurate you are. So what happens next?
Well, I think it's going to be a slow, very slow recovery. The freezing of the credit markets that began in its worst form on September 15th, they're becoming a little bit unlocked. Mm-hmm. Credit is flowing. But the fundamental problem, which is a lack of aggregate demand, is still there. Remember, what kept the economy going before the crisis was this housing bubble that allowed Americans to take out hundreds of billions of dollars out of their house and mortgage equity. They spent that, and that kept the economy going.
And that's all gone.
That's gone. I mean, we had a very peculiar situation where we were growing inequality in America.
Right.
But we told the people at the bottom, don't worry, consume as if your income is going up.
All right, so how long are we in a malaise in your view?
Well, it really depends on what the government does. Mm-hmm. You know, the government's been focusing so far on fixing the banks.
Right.
That's important, necessary, but it's far from sufficient.
Right.
And they haven't really begun to talk about these broader issues, some of which can only be dealt with globally, internationally.
All right. Well, something that caught our attention, I'm going to bring this up because I know you've also talked about the potential for higher taxes. Do we need to have, I mean, how can we do higher, first of all, you think we need higher taxes?
Well, the point is that what I emphasize is not the taxes, but the spending.
Okay.
That the United States has underspent on infrastructure, on education, technology, and if we're going to be competitive in the modern era, you have to make those investments.
So we need to do that.
So we need to do that. And so once you recognize that, then you say, how are you going to pay for them?
Right.
And there are basically two ways of paying for things.
Money
Taxes,
falls from the sky.
Yeah, okay, that's three, okay. And the other two are taxes and borrowing. But we've been borrowing as if it's going out of style.
Right.
The problem is that too often people, particularly in the financial markets, only look at one side of the country's balance sheet. Mm-hmm. They look at the debt. And they say the debt's going up, liabilities are going up, but they don't look at the other side, which are the assets. When you're borrowing and your assets are going up, you can actually be stronger. If you're investing well, you're generating the income that will help pay back the debt.
But are we investing well right now?
Not right now, because the way we put money into the banks was a disaster. Mm-hmm. The war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq were a disaster. So if we change those, so the answer is whether we need to raise taxes or borrow really depends on a whole configuration of economic policy. Mm-hmm. This is an example of the kind of spending that you could justifiably say borrowing makes sense.
All right. So when, Professor Stiglitz, we talk about the health care plan and that cost of $1 trillion, you're saying we should do that? And then if we need to raise taxes to pay for it, or what?
Yes, I do think we really do need to do something about a health care program. The problem, and this has been a problem festering, when I was in the Clinton administration in '93.
Right, ongoing.
And it's just gotten worse since then. We spend more on health care and get poor results than other countries around the world, or our competitors, France, England. The consequence of that is our firms are less competitive, especially because we have what is called an employer-based health insurance. Right. They have to pay for it. And the result of that is that we don't have money to spend on other things that would make us more competitive.
All right. So going back to, do you think then the administration ultimately is going to have to raise taxes here?
Let me say, it really depends
on what they do,
on what other things we do. I wish we would decrease our expenditures on defense.
Right.
We're spending a lot of money on weapons that don't work against enemies that don't exist.
Right, right.
So if we did that, we'd have more money, and this healthcare would be a breeze.
I want to go back to the economy overall, because I know you're very involved with complex mathematical models in terms of looking at markets and so on. I mean, is there a model that you're kind of looking at right now in terms of deciding kind of what happens next? Well, and does it take into account potentially another crisis?
The basic models that economists are very simple. There are some very sophisticated models, very complex. When they come in out consistent with what you might call common sense,
right.
I feel more confident in the more general models. I mean, those complicated models are the things that got everybody into trouble.
And they're a mistake in your view.
Exactly. I mean, they're useful as a complement. So right now, the basic model is very simple. You ask, there are 4 components of aggregate demand. And that's what keeps the economy growing when you have more supply than demand.
Right.
Okay? And that's where we are right now. The 4 components are consumption, investment, net exports, and government spending. And so you just think about what's going to happen to each of those. And that's why I feel pessimistic. Consumption, with basically the savings rate was down to 0.
Right.
It's gone up to 4 or 5%. It's likely to continue to go. That's going to mean that it's going to be more muted than it was before.
So what kind of growth are you expecting for, let's say, the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, very low.
1%?
Yes, in that. We could remain negative. We could have some more shocks. As you say, there are lots of potholes in the road. We know there are problems in commercial real estate. We know that there are going to be more foreclosures in the mortgage market.
Right.
We know that the banks have been using very non-transparent accounting. They're not been forced to write down their impaired mortgages.
Right.
So we know we don't know the state of the banks.
Right. There's a lot of questions still out there.
A lot of questions.
All right. We got to take a break. We sit tight. Hang around.
Okay.
All right. We're talking with Professor Joseph Stiglitz. Stick around, everybody. More to come. Also talk to him about his thoughts in terms of how the administration is doing so far on the economy. We're back in 2.